I have maybe, I've lost track, but maybe 150 to 200 of these books. As you can see, I write very, very small. And I write every single day. And I begin each day with the following words. Thank you, God, for the gift of another day. Please keep all of us safe and out of harm's way, and help me to help myself. And I truly believe that every day is a gift. And no matter how bad things get, there's always a blessing that you can find if you look for it. My name is Beverly Engelman. I'm 82 years old and still going strong. I was born in Brooklyn, and it was my mother and father and my brother, who was 8 years younger than me. Before I became Orthodox, I was always told my Hebrew name was Basha. And then when I started Hebrew school, and my Hebrew teacher said, oh, your name is Batya. And she said, that's a very special name. It means daughter of God. Well, I have to tell you, I take that very seriously. I am so proud to be Jewish. Education and Jewish go together. That's our history. I remember how important teachers were in my life. I still remember my 6th grade teacher. I can't tell you how many years ago this was. Her name was Miss Morgan, and I think she was my inspiration for becoming a teacher. I first intended to be a doctor. There's only one thing wrong with that. I wasn't very good in science. And so I actually dropped out of school. I dropped out of Brooklyn College for 10 years, worked, and then went back to become a teacher. And that was definitely my profession. I understood what it was to have a problem when it came to, learning. And so I felt that as a teacher, if I had children that were having problems, I knew exactly how to deal with them. And I knew from my own experience that it was possible to overcome the problems and go on to do whatever you wanted to do. When you're working with a class of 30 kids, it's not really 30, it's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, but because each of them is an individual. A lot of people think, well, you only teach from, till 3 o'clock, and then you have 2 months off during the summer. There's a lot of work involved, as if you were on stage for all the time that you're in the classroom. There's no such thing as sitting down and taking it easy. You're always there for the kids. I had a young man in my class who stuttered terribly. And I worked with him. And by the middle of the year, he wasn't stuttering anymore. It wasn't just me, it was me with him. It was a joint effort. And that made me feel really good. I honestly think that the one thing I gave these kids was that they have to believe in themselves. And if they believed in that they could do something, they would be able to do it. And actually, this is the way I'm living my life now, because things are much harder for me. But I keep talking to myself and telling myself, think positively, and you will be able to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. I'm here for a reason, and I think over the years I have done things that have been of help to people, and I'm very proud of that.
My name is Paula Weissman, and I was born in 1929, July 27, in Czechoslovakia. 1944, they marched in and they said, you must go. We wound up in Poland, which we didn't know we were there. They stopped to get water, I guess, to put in the cars, and they stopped, and there was a man standing with a cigarette in his hand. So we asked the man, do you know where we're going? He didn't speak, and he flickered the ashes. He was trying to tell us that we go into the end of the line, that it's a crematorium. 3 o'clock in the morning, they told us to get out of the train, and they had huge dogs. They looked like Russian wolfhounds. I never seen dogs so big. Nobody knows why are you here? I smelled like a burned rubber. When I asked them, what is that smell? They said, oh, they're baking bread. I knew right away it's not true, because bread smells very, a good aroma. And they put everybody on one side and put the other people like my age. I was 13 years old. They said, you go on the other side. And I didn't want to go because I wanted to go with my parents and my brother. And they were laughing. They thought it's a joke because this was a chance for my survival if I go the other way. But I didn't know at the time where they're going. So you're standing there for maybe an hour, and then they marched us to a place which they called a house, but it wasn't a house. It was more or less like a chicken coop. You think this is a temporary place. They treat you like you're nothing. You're just something. You don't exist. You're not real. You're to them just a piece of wood or something. I got very sick last year. As I was at the hospital recuperating, suddenly it dawned on me that I never spoke about whatever happened to me. I felt that people should know about this. The world should know what people went through, how they suffered. I'm not getting any younger, and I say I have to do it now. So it's a must for me. Try to tell the world what really happened.
I was in a camp, a working camp, which was transformed to a concentration camp. In January of 1945, when the Russians came near, they closed that camp and we started marching. We marched quite long, and in the evening we came to a place where they said we have to stay overnight. The place they deposited us was a barn. During the night, one of the girls was there, decided she was very thirsty. So she tried to get out, and she told to the guard she would like to get some water. With that, he said to her, no, but you stay in a barn, you have so many cows. You can get milk, whatever you want. Now this was all, everybody got very excited, and everybody started to milk cows. To me, it looked very, very easy. But I got my life surprise. It was not easy at all, because I could not get one drop of milk of the cow I tried to milk. After we left the next morning, we were put on cattle trains. I don't really remember if it was 2 nights or 2 days. When we stopped there, it was around about 5 or 6 women with big kettles, and they gave us soup. It was very, very surprising because the women were German. That showed that it were some people who have some kind of heart, or whatever they had, but we got food, and they were German ladies. That evening, or maybe next evening, we arrived to our destination, Bergen-Belsen, and we went to a big room, they took us, and there they told us to get undressed. No, by that time, we already know about Auschwitz and gas chamber. So, but it was no way out. We were in a closed room, no place to go. So we got undressed, and they said we have to go and take a shower. We know about the showers too, but it was really showers. When we were all together, we marched to a room, a big, big room, and they told us to lie down on the floor, and there we slept. The next day when we woke out, we were full of lice. Most of our people got typhoid. Then, eventually, I got sick. One day, I was lying there beside another girl, and she told me, Paula, if you lived, you will see the British, we are liberated. And my answer said, I really don't care anymore. I just couldn't lift my head. So I never saw the British that night. And I think that I was so sick and I could not go out and have bread or whatever. I survived. When the British came, they opened the kitchens and everything else. So people were running to get food. And I think they overate. And a lot of people died. I did not change my belief that if I wouldn't be Jewish, I would survive. It never entered my mind. I was born Jewish, I am Jewish, and I will die Jewish.
As a boy, I had certain anti-Semitic experiences. I was told in the schoolyard when I was 10 or 11 years old that I had killed Jesus Christ. As a Jew, thinking about Nazi Germany made me hyper-conscious of the struggle that was going on in the world. I think that as a young man I was more conscious than probably most. In common with my generation, I knew that when I reached the age of 18, I would be drafted. Mrs. Ethel Shapiro did not want her little son Raymond going off to get killed in the war. And she hoped that my flat feet would make me ineligible for the draft. But I was more than reconciled to going into the Army. I was sent to O'Reilly General Hospital in Springfield, Missouri, to become a dental technician, a 3 or 4 month course. After that, I joined the 178th General Hospital. We were assembled and sent overseas in 1944. A few months after D-Day, my unit arrived in Normandy and then were transshipped to the city of Reims. We then set up our hospital. We treated German and American patients. Now there were 600 or 700 or 800 guys in the hospital. There were maybe 8 or 10 or 12 Jewish doctors, but among the enlisted men, not many. I was made to feel by my encounters with certain anti-Semites, and I would say that these anti-Semites were ignorant more than they were ill-willed. Some Americans had fallen for the Nazi line that Roosevelt was a Jew. And when Roosevelt died, all of us were in shock, and some of us were in tears, and this Corporal Paul was saying something like, "I'm glad he's died, the damn Jew bastard." And for the first time since I was a kid, I had a fist fight with him. We slugged it out in the barracks for about 10 or 15 minutes with no result, only exhaustion. The Army experience was a leveler. The war changed everything. The 82nd Airborne Division was stationed in the Reims area, and we in the dental department knew when there was going to be a jump. Army regulations dictated that you could not go into battle without a certain number of occluding teeth. When the word got out that there was going to be a jump, we would get a big increase in the number of broken dentures. They were brave, but they weren't that brave. The Germans mounted a ferocious offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, but they were stopped at Bastogne. So I came from a dental laboratory to be a participant in that battle. One night, the lights went on in the barracks. The first sergeant came around with a clipboard, and they selected all of those young men who were not married and said, "Get ready, get your barracks bags packed, you're going out." In an hour or so, we were on weapons carriers and headed north into Belgium, where I first was shot at and surprised and terrified, hiding behind a wall and luckily not being hit. Then, after half an hour or so, onward to the battlefield of Bastogne. And the American casualties in that battle, 29,000 killed, not to mention many thousands more wounded. That was my experience of warfare as it really was, blood and death.
I think the truth is a dangerous thing because my truth is not necessarily your truth. When I was about 9 years old, I was at summer camp, and I remember talking about Gandhi and that India was a subject of England and was attempting to become independent. And I made the statement that, well, I'm for their becoming independent, but they're not ready yet. And the son of the director, who was quite a bit older, he said, "Well, what makes you think they're not ready yet?" And he spoke to me about it, and I realized that I just took for granted that what I read was true, and it was startling to me to realize that I couldn't believe everything that I read. I have been actively attempting to change the world for the better, to make it a more just world, all of my adult life. I feel the need to be an activist because there is so much injustice in the world, and that seems ridiculous and unfair. I think that just voicing opposition or even just going to demonstrations is not enough. For me, becoming an activist was building a movement. There was a demonstration in Manhattan against nuclear technology, and it was a large crowd of people, and at some point we lay on the ground as if we were dead from a nuclear bomb. And I remember that I was so moved to be part of this group and doing that activism that I started to cry. I was just so happy that I was becoming an activist. I've been very active in working with the Independence Party for many years, for about probably 30 years. And one of the very key issues has to do with the lack of democracy in the way our elections are held. And one of the key features of the lack of democracy has to do with the fact that 20 states, New York State being one of them, do not allow independents to vote in the primaries. And the primaries in many cases, in most cases, are really the key to where the election takes place. So I've been working on that for many, many years. For about 12 years, I organized the Bronx Independence Party and got a lot of credit, a lot of recognition for the work that I did there. What was required there was to get signatures on a petition, many, thousands of signatures. After I decided I didn't want to do any more petitioning, I realized I was bored, and I decided I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. And luckily, in 3 days, I came up with this idea. I'm going to be working with people who are dying and their families, offering emotional and spiritual support. I think I've led a good life, and I've had an easy life. Emotionally, it hasn't been that easy, but it's easy insofar as I've never been hungry. I've always had a roof over my head. I have wonderful friends. So, you know, I don't live where bombs are dropping, and I've never had to deal with a fire or a flood. So in that respect, I've had a very easy life. So I'm very proud of the fact that in spite of this very easy life, that I've done something to help make it a better world.